Welcome to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura. My name is Kevin Gray. Thanks for listening today. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to download the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, like and comment on the video as well and subscribe to the channel. And you can also check me out on every Mavericks pre- and post-game show as the Mavericks pre- and post-game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. The Mavericks absolutely annihilate the Sacramento Kings by 36, 132 to 96 as the Mavericks get their fifth straight win and officially take over sixth place in the Western Conference as they move to a season-high 14 games above 500. Now at 43-29, now 21-14, away from the American Airlines Center as the Mavericks announced themselves as the most dangerous team in the Western Conference after they get a combined 74 points from Tim Hardaway Jr., Luka Doncic, and Kyrie Irving as the Mavericks knock down 22 three-pointers, shooting over 55% from the field and from three, and absolutely destroying the Sacramento Kings. Of course, the game was set up, of course, as a massive showdown in the Western Conference standings as we get down to the final regular season games. And for the Mavericks now at 43-29 have put themselves in position with a couple of days off to be able to handle business moving forward in the West. With the win paired with the Pelicans' loss on Tuesday, the Mavericks are now just one game behind the Pelicans for the fifth spot in the Western Conference, and even have put themselves within striking distance potentially of the 4 seed in the West. When you look at what this team has done over the last 23 games, it has been absolutely phenomenal. We'll detail it throughout the course of the show, but for the Mavericks, a signature win, their most complete win of the season. And when you look at what they were able to do both offensively and defensively, holding the high-powered Sacramento Kings to under 100 points while dropping 132 in the variety of ways in which they did it with, this Mavericks team is playing their best basketball of the season and have been playing as one of the best teams in the NBA really since the beginning of February. And if you're a Mavericks fan, the confidence at which the Mavericks played with against Sacramento was seen throughout the entirety of the game, starting with P.J. Washington, who was able to get things started in the first quarter, knocking down 3 3-pointers and had 9 points. That, to me, told me a lot about the mentality and the focus that the Mavericks had coming into this game on the second night of a back-to-back after beating the Utah Jazz on Monday. They rolled into Sacramento, the team that looked fresher and with more energy. And Luka Doncic, who came into the game questionable with Achilles soreness, you could tell the Achilles was bothering him early on in the game. But as the game went on, he continued to get better and better. But for P.J. Washington, who has struggled mightily, to say the least, from the three-point line, set the tone by knocking down 3 threes in that first quarter. Tim Hardaway Jr. also had 7 points in that first quarter, and that was an impetus for what you were going to see from the Mavericks from the three-point line. As I mentioned, the Mavericks knocking down 22 of 39 three-pointers, shooting 56% from downtown. Coming into the game against the Sacramento Kings on Tuesday, the Mavericks themselves had not been shooting the ball well from three. In fact, shooting just 33% from downtown over the last 7-8 games, and had not been able to get things going from distance. That changed in a massive way against Sacramento, and you give the Mavericks credit for being able to knock down shots when they needed to, but then dominating in every aspect of the game. With the 22 threes that they made, they also had 51 made field goals, 34 assists on the 51 made field goals that they had, as the Mavericks shot 55% from the field overall in the game. But that, to me, was huge to see confidence for P.J. Washington knocking down some three-pointers to really give himself an opportunity to play really well in a game where you look at not just what he did from a scoring standpoint with the 14 points that he had, but the 13 rebounds that he had as well, and the defense continuing to lead for the Mavericks, which I'll detail a little bit later on, especially in that third quarter. where Derek Lively and Luka Doncic did a terrific job on Domantas Sabonis, keeping him in check in what was a huge third quarter for the Mavericks. But the Mavericks led by 3 at the end of one, 31-28, as I mentioned, with P.J. Washington pacing the Mavericks with the 9 points that he had. And then you go on to the second quarter, and what was a nip-and-tuck game between the Mavericks and the Kings in that first half. But the Mavericks were able to use an 8-2 run to get their lead eventually to 9, and that's where Luka Doncic really took over. You look at what he was able to do, especially in that second quarter. It was a tale of two halves for both Luka and Kyrie. When you look at what Luka Doncic was able to do in that second quarter for the Mavericks, he was absolutely spectacular in what he did to be able to put the Mavericks in position, scoring 19 points in that second quarter. De'Aaron Fox had 11, but the constant shooting of the Mavericks, especially from the three-point line, really put them into the lead going into halftime as they were up by 5 at 58-53. At one point, the Kings missed 7 straight shots to allow the Mavericks to really start to take control of the game, but it was the outside shooting and the variety of scoring by Luka Doncic that really took over in that game. Coming up more on the other side of the break, how the Mavericks were able to dominate the Sacramento Kings, put themselves in position as the most dangerous team in the Western Conference, and how they are peaking at the right time going forward. But before we get there, let's hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast. Let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs. Thanks for hanging out with me through that quick break, and appreciate today's sponsor of our video and our podcast, in Aura. We were detailing how the Mavericks were able to take control, especially in that second quarter where Luka Doncic scored 19 points as the Mavericks outscored the Kings 27-25 after building a 3-point lead at the end of one, where they led at halftime by 5 at 58-53. But things really turned in that third quarter, and as I mentioned, it was a tale of two halves for Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Luka Doncic, of course, had 19 of his 26 first-half points in that second quarter. Then Kyrie Irving took over in that third quarter, in a quarter where the Mavericks scored 38 points, outscoring the Kings by 15, and in the middle of that, using a 15-2 run to blow the game wide open. Overall, it became a 22-4 run, but it was Kyrie Irving setting the tone at the beginning of that third quarter, knocking down threes. He was able to get a quick 5 points and really put the pedal to the metal for the Mavericks from a scoring standpoint, and it was off to the races from there. Him hitting a huge 3 in transition that got the lead up to 12 off of a Daniel Gafford assist. P.J. Washington continued his strong game, knocking down another 3-pointer, this time in the left corner, that eventually puts the lead to 17. But it was Kyrie Irving taking control of the game in the second half, specifically in that third quarter, where the Mavericks were able to lead by 20 at the end of 3. And that is why this team is as dangerous as any in the league. When you've got an MVP candidate in Luka Doncic dropping 26 on you in the first half, 19 of which coming in the second quarter. And then you look at the third quarter when your other superstar and Kyrie Irving is able to take over, scoring 12 points, going 5 of 6 from the field, 2 of 3 from downtown, also have 4 assists in the quarter as well. Each one of them can take over a game at any point, at any time. And that what makes this Mavericks team dangerous, when you've got two guys who can not only go off at the same time, but have learned how to play off of each other, allowing the other to take turns when they have the opportunity, if they have the hot hand, or if the other guy isn't necessarily playing well, being able to take over from an offensive scoring standpoint and a distribution standpoint. This makes this Mavericks team extremely good, and they're doing the things now that we are wanting and have been wanting to see from this team throughout the course of the year. I detailed a little bit earlier how well the Mavericks have been playing over their last 23 games. The Mavericks now, in their last 23 games, are 17-6. They're tied for third in the NBA in offensive rating at 119.1 with the Indiana Pacers. Also, during that span, they're top 10 in the NBA in defensive rating. In fact, comfortably in the top 10 at number 7 at 111.4, which gives them an overall net rating of a plus 7.7, which is good for third in the league. We're talking about now a much larger sample size that has gone on since really the beginning of February that has given us the profile that the Mavericks have played as one of the best teams in the NBA, not just the Western Conference, but when you look at what the Celtics have been doing, when you look at what the Nuggets have been doing, the Mavericks are right there, and they have been led by their defense. You saw what they did against Sacramento, only giving up 43 points in that second half, and I wanted to make sure that we stopped down on that third quarter. Yes, offensively, they were able to dominate, dropping the 38 points, but it was the defense of Derek Lively, of Luka Doncic, and being able to handle Domantas Sabonis. Derek Lively with an extremely large presence on the inside. Daniel Gafford had gotten into early foul trouble in this game, so you saw Derek Lively get more opportunities within this game, and he was able to take advantage of it. And when you look at what he was able to do, he was able to really bottle up Domantas Sabonis with physicality, with the length in terms of the block shots. You look at what he able to do throughout the entirety of the game. Derek Lively, for his numbers on the night, yes, he was just 2 of 5 from the field, but he played nearly 22 minutes, was a plus 10 in the game for the Mavericks as well, had 7 rebounds in the game and a couple of block shots, and you saw his ability to rotate and be able to really provide presence in the middle for the Mavericks. That was huge, and I thought that was a big difference in the game with what he was able to do in providing that solid defense. Had a big block on Chris Duarte as well in that third quarter. He was really, really good for this team and really helped them be able to stabilize on the defensive end. And you got to give credit to Tim Hardaway Jr. Much maligned Tim Hardaway Jr. when it has been in terms of his play. He has struggled mightily from the three-point line, but he was massive in this game for the Mavericks. At one point between the third and fourth quarters, scoring 12 points, and his ability to knock down shots, he was able to knock down 4 threes in this game for the Mavericks, going 4 of 6 from 3 en route to the 22 3-pointers that they made. As I've talked about previously, and I know that for Mavericks fans at times, not necessarily a fan favorite because of the streakiness at which he plays, but he has stuck with it. And he said something very interesting post-game when it came to his struggles and how he was continuing to work through them, because even in the Utah game where he was able to keep the Mavericks in it, especially in that first quarter, didn't play well during the second half. But Kyrie Irving went up to him and let him know, continue to be aggressive. We're going to need you. And we've talked about the leadership of Kyrie Irving continuing to be veteran leader guy, and that's just yet another example of him taking that leadership role and encouraging one of his teammates, whom the Mavericks know they're going to need down the stretch with their ability to knock down threes, to be able to provide them that as they get ready to go into the playoffs. And those kinds of things are the signs of a team that's gelling, that's coming together and playing with the kind of chemistry and trust that Jason Kidd constantly is talking about, that will allow this team to continue to flourish as they move toward the playoffs and as they try to secure a top 6 spot in the Western Conference. But Tim Hardaway Jr. was spectacular in the game, as he had Went 8 of 14 from the field, had the 22 points, as I mentioned, combining with Luka and Kyrie for 74 in the game. And now as you move forward for the rest of the season, the Mavericks now look as a team as dangerous as any. They were, of course, able to go on to win going away in that fourth quarter. In fact, outscoring the Kings 24-9 in the first 8 minutes as they scored 36 points and was able to mop up with the Kings in garbage time to be able to win this game going away by 36 points. But they did all of the things that you and I have been wanting to see from this team throughout the course of the season, and now they're doing it at the right time. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, while they may not be the best team in the NBA, while they may not be the best team in the Western Conference, they are the most dangerous team in the league, because when you have two superstar scorers that can not only pass but also score, guys know their roles. And when you start looking at teams that have been successful in the playoffs and the way that they profile, guys know their roles, whether it be Daniel Gafford providing defense and rebounding in the middle, Derek Lively being able to do the same coming off the bench with the maturity that he has shown, going from a starting role to now coming off the bench. PJ Washington with the flexibility on the defensive end, able to guard multiple positions, and now hopefully the offense starting to turn the corner for him in terms of knocking down three-pointers. And then the other guys, whether it be Tim Hardaway Jr., Dante Exum, all of these other guys fitting specifically into the roles that they are capable of around the orbit of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. This team is playing at a very high level and giving teams problems in a number of ways, because one of the things that we have been seeing from the Mavericks here recently is their struggles from three, but still finding ways to beat teams and dominate teams in the paint. This time, they were able to put it all together with the balance in terms of dropping 44 points in the paint, but also was a plus 33 from the three-point line and knocking down the 22 three-pointers that they did, but also forcing the issue in terms of their defense. They forced 14 turnovers in this game and also scored 21 points off those turnovers. So when this team is sharing the basketball, which they have been extremely good at this season, putting pressure on teams defensively by turning teams over and getting out in the fast break, where they scored 18 points in the fast break against Sacramento, knocking down threes at the high rate that we have been accustomed to seeing this team do throughout the course of the season. And now they are defending at an extremely high level. This makes for a formula for a team that can do some real damage in the NBA playoffs. And it was crazy just a couple of weeks ago where this team had lost 5 of 6 games, feeling like the bottom had dropped out of it. But now we are watching a maturing team being able to work through the adversity that they did. They've now won 9 of their last 10 games and have put themselves in a terrific position to control their own destiny down the stretch. And for the Mavericks, that is what you want as you get ready to take on Sacramento again on Friday. I expect Sacramento to be much better in the game on Friday, but at the same time, the maturity of being able to come in on the second night of a back-to-back, knowing that you had to take this game and give yourself a chance to be able to split the season series against Sacramento to keep yourself in the race for that 6th spot in the West. I thought the Mavericks did an absolutely terrific job, and the physicality at which they came and showed throughout the course of the game, they looked like the more desperate team in this game against Sacramento. And now you look across the rest of the NBA, the national conversation will be around this team about how much damage they can do in the NBA playoffs. And no matter what, whether they're in the play-in or they finish in the top 6, whatever, the Mavericks have now become the proverbial, you don't want to see this team in the playoffs because of their capabilities on both offense and now on defense. And yes, I have to give Jason Kidd his flowers for the way that he's been able to help this team turn it around and them sticking with it when it comes to not only the game plans, but now the execution on a night-to-night basis. Because no longer are we talking about this team hanging their heads on the defensive end when shots aren't falling. They have now grown up and have found ways to beat teams in different ways, even when they're not making shots. But now, at least in this game against Sacramento, they were able to knock down the threes. And hopefully this is a breakout of what has been a huge struggle for them over the last couple of weeks in terms of knocking down three-pointers, because that is going to be huge down the stretch to keep teams honest on the defensive end, to create open lanes for Luka and Kyrie to be able to dominate and penetrate, to find open shooters. But now guys like PJ Washington making teams pay for leaving them wide open on the outside. And as long as that continues to happen, this team could score in a variety of ways, whether it be getting out in transition, whether it be in the half court, Luka and Kyrie dominating and taking turns, or at the same time being able to dominate teams with their ability to distribute and score. This is an extremely dangerous team that finds themselves now with a variety of ways to win, and now the confidence to know that they can go into any type of game against any type of team and play that style, because now you have the personnel to be able to be flexible, whether it's Daniel Gafford or Derek Lively in the middle, whether it's Luka and Kyrie controlling the pace of the game offensively, whether it's PJ Washington being able to use his physicality and length and athleticism on the defensive end, Derrick Jones Jr. being able to do the same from a point of attack style in terms of the defense that he likes to play as well. There are a lot of different ways that this team can now beat you. And the question will be now, can they continue moving forward, where this team has really been in playoff mode, as we detailed, really over the last 22, 23 games, because they've been trying to get themselves in this spot to where they can be in the top six. So they are playing and peaking at the right time, but they're playing with the right mindset that gives them the opportunity now to continue to move forward as far as the West. And then when you look at the Western Conference standings right now, the fourth spot is not out of the question given the slide that we've seen from the Los Angeles Clippers. Obviously, the Pelicans have been playing well, but they lose in their game against the Oklahoma City Thunder on Tuesday. And with the Mavericks now controlling their own destiny with games still against the Houston Rockets, who have been playing well. They've won 9 straight games. Golden State getting back on track after beating the Miami Heat to be able to maintain their 10th spot in the West. The Lakers used a 19-point comeback in the fourth quarter against the Milwaukee Bucks to get a double overtime win on Tuesday against Milwaukee. The Western Conference teams in those 6 to 10 spots right now are playing well, and the Mavericks right now are as hot as any team in the league. So the work doesn't stop because these teams are playing at an extremely high level, but it is not unrealistic to think that this team, who is now just one game behind the New Orleans Pelicans for the 5th spot, and now find themselves within striking distance of potentially getting home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs, which again, a couple of weeks ago felt unthinkable the way that this team was playing. They were not defending. They were not shooting the ball well from three, but they have really been able to turn it around. And you give Kyrie Irving and Markieff Morris for being able to take control of this team from a leadership standpoint and sitting this team down and being able to have an opportunity to communicate what this time of the year means and be able to turn it around on both ends of the floor. And they've done exactly that. And they played their most complete game of the season in crushing the Sacramento Kings by 36 points. And for Mavericks fans who watched this game and watched the totality at which they were able to get down with Sacramento, whether it be the rotations, playing well on the defensive end, diving on the floor for loose balls, the energy that was created on both ends of the floor, this team played the type of winning basketball that you desire to see as you get into late March and into early April, to give you ideas and confidence that they can continue to carry this into the Western Conference playoffs. And that's exactly where we are right now after the Mavericks were able to absolutely dominate the Sacramento Kings in arguably their best performance of the season. Everyone getting involved. And that, to me, is the biggest takeaway on why this team is so dangerous now. They're playing collectively as a team with an understanding of what is expected of them night in and night out, executing the game plan, being able to play with consistent force that allows them to beat teams in a variety of ways. And now they're playing at that kind of pace that you will allow them to see them do forward for the rest of the season. And that is going to be a lot of fun to watch as we get ready to turn the calendar from March to April and what that could mean for a possible run in the playoffs. But you can't do much better than what you did against the Sacramento Kings. Your bench was great. You dropped 48 points off your bench as well. But Tim Hardaway Jr., PJ Washington knocking down threes, and you know what you're going to get from Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving in the game as well as they combine in that game for 52 points between Luka and Kyrie. Luka dominated the first half. Kyrie Irving dominated in the second half. Now Luka will have a couple of days of rest to be able to rest that Achilles that was bothering him in the game, gutting it out. And the last thing I'll say about this, because one of the things that will be a storyline down the stretch as well, Luka Doncic and his MVP candidacy. He continues to put up eye-popping numbers, and you saw the way that he put the Mavericks on his back in that first half and was really able to dominate, and you were able to rest him for the fourth quarter, not having to have him play, as the Mavericks were able to finish out taking out the Sacramento Kings, which is huge as he continues to conserve his energy to get ready to try and get this team solidified in the top six. Luka Doncic's MVP candidacy continues to be on full display, and the numbers that he continues to put up are absolutely jaw-dropping. And just to give you more perspective before we get out of here today on what these numbers mean for the Mavericks and what they were able to do, think about it. They hit 22 three-pointers in the game against Sacramento, shooting 56% from downtown, the most efficient shooting night from three that this team has had all season long. The Mavericks are now 7-0 this season when they make at least 23s in a game. They're 32-8 all time when they hit at least 20 triples in a game. But that, again, gives you indication on what they do when they're able to knock down threes from the outside. And I can't get out of here without celebrating Tim Hardaway Jr., who, of course, had the 22-point effort against the Sacramento Kings. The Mavericks are now 12-5 this season when Tim Hardaway Jr. has at least 20 points in the game, now up to 196 three-pointers made this season, 4 shy of reaching 200 three-pointers this season, which will be the 4th time in the last 5 years as he's made at least 200 threes in a season. So Tim Hardaway Jr. really playing well for the Mavericks and was able to help them get a big, big win on the road against Sacramento. As I mentioned, now 14 games above 500, winners of 9 of their last 10, peaking in the right time. And yes, folks, the Dallas Mavericks are the most dangerous team in the NBA right now, and they're proving it on the floor night in and night out. The Mavericks have a couple of days off. They're off on Wednesday. They'll get back to practice on Thursday before they take on Sacramento again in the 4th and final game of the season series in Sacramento. That game will tip off at 9 o'clock in Sacramento. I'll have the pregame show beginning at 8:30 p.m. on the Dallas Mavericks radio network on 97.1 The Freak. And, of course, we'll be able to recap and talk about everything out the course of the rest of the week as well. Continuing to watch again and monitor Luka Doncic in terms of that Achilles injury to make sure that he is going to be okay as the rest of this week goes on. And on Friday, I will have Landon Thomas of Mavs Fans for Life on here on the podcast, as well as we'll talk all things Mavericks basketball here on Inside the Mavs. Again, really appreciate you joining me here on this latest episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, you can download and subscribe to Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak, wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And you can like and comment on the video as well. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and you can follow me all over social media and on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports as well. That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs after the Mavericks crushed the Sacramento Kings in a 36-point beatdown. We'll look to continue the momentum as they look for their 6th straight win when they take on Sacramento again on Friday. I'll keep you covered for all of your in-depth analysis and coverage right here on Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. My name is Kevin Gray, and I'll talk to you next time right here on Inside the Mavs.